Welcome to episode 72 of our Road to Unicum. Today we review the Strv 103B. This is the Tier 10 Swedish tank destroyer in World of Tanks, and we're going to take a look at a live oaks battle. Now, in the last community poll, I offered two tanks as the options for you guys to vote on. This tank and the German Tier 10 light tank, the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen. And the voting was split almost exactly 50-50, very slightly favoring the German light tank. But after reading the comments, many of you had asked me to review a turretless tank destroyer, and so I thought that this would be better for variety for my channel. I did review the Tier 9 Strv 103 back in episode 45, but it's helpful to show a very unique tank like this being played in different maps. Now, this initial location that I go to has the magical trifecta that you always hear me talking about: a good field of fire, soft cover for camo, and adjacent hard cover. And so if I get spotted, I can pull back behind the building and wait until I'm no longer lit. I'm firing on a couple obvious locations. Now, the Strv has several very unusual, notable strengths. First of all, it's got ninja levels of camouflage, which is great. It also has exceptional shell velocity of 1500 meters per second, so it's very good at hitting moving targets. It also has really high DPM, so you can see the reload here is only about 5.7 seconds, which is just amazing. So while this tank destroyer doesn't have the alpha that a lot of tank destroyers do, it can really pump out the damage. And then last but not least, the frontal hull armor is extremely angled, so it's like 40 millimeters thick, and so if you're being fired at by armor piercing or APCR rounds that are 120 millimeters in caliber or lower, and you're facing them frontally, you're going to auto bounce their shells, which is really powerful. Now, heat has a much higher degree required for ricochet or auto bounce, so you don't really bounce a lot of heat rounds. What a lot of players will do to counter the Strv tanks, the Tier 9 or Tier 10, is to fire heat at them. Now, watch what I'm doing here. This is very intentional. I just knocked over some trees to create a wider bush area. Why do I do this? Well, there is one bush that I could have parked behind, but it's a pretty obvious location to sit in. And by knocking over the trees, all of a sudden I've made that bush area about 3 times wider. So they might know that I'm here, but they've got to guess correctly where I am. And a lot of these tanks, if they're just firing AP, these are 120 millimeter guns, right? So I'm going to auto bounce their shells. Now, you may be wondering why I'm not backed up a little. If I back up a little further, it'll make these bushes directly in front of me solid, which means that even when I fire, retain the camo value. And there's 2 reasons why I'm not doing it. One is if I back up so that these bushes right in front of me are solid, it does impair my vision just a little bit physically, right? And that was hilarious there. I fired at the first 7-1 and hit the second one, but hey, I'm keeping my gun active, and that's the #1 principle of Road to Unicum: keep your gun hot, right? The other thing too is you can notice, like with this E5 and the 7-1, where they're located, there are bushes right in front of them. So when I fire, those bushes still provide camo to me. So it's unlikely they're going to spot me until they get a little bit closer. But like I said, if you were in a tank that had a weaker camo value, I would be backed up another 5-6 meters, and then that way the bushes directly in front of me would be solid. But this way, it's a little easier to see what's going on. And again, if the vision doesn't bother at all, then back up by all means and make the bush line solid. So here's part of the problem, right? That gorilla just came over the hill. I think he's probably the one that spotted me, and they're already thankfully missed, but I am going to take some fire incoming, so armor piercing stuff I can handle. It's shells like that heat, which I'm not going to bounce, right? But keep in mind, after about 10 to 12 seconds, I'm going to drop from their vision, and then they're going to have to guess where exactly I am to fire on me. And partly, it can be hard for people to track exactly where you are, especially since I knocked down that tree and I've kind of got a wider bush line, so they have to guess, am I in the left, right, or middle of the bush, and how far in or out of the bush. And I'm trying very hard to keep the C5 alive. Now notice, I flexed over to this flank when it was clear that we were outnumbered here. And one of the stereotypes that really bothered me the most from the WOT community is, oh, you should follow the lemming train, right? And I think that's one of the most banal and least insightful things. Like, yes, there is strength in numbers, but you don't want to just give up areas of the map or not punish them, right? I'm in a good position where even if our E5 dies, I can provide spotting on their tanks. So as they try to push up the 0 line, our arty can fire on them and we can punish them. This is really important. You can't just give up ground for nothing, especially when if they win an area, they have to cross a kill zone. So The thing about this map is whether they win city, which they're going to, we just have a T-34 facing against a VK, which is a terrible matchup, let alone they also have an E-75, right? So we're going to lose city, but in order for them, if they're going to exit the A and B lanes and head east, it's going to give us the opportunity for me to play vision games with them. Now, right here I'm making a bit of a mistake. I don't actually need to go help the standard B. Like, he can take out that Panther 2. That Panther 2 is a tier down from him, and since he's an auto reloader, he's going to have multiple shots, so I'm going to turn around. Another unique thing about the Strv 103B is it has exceptional reverse speed. I think you can go backwards at like 50 kilometers an hour, which is great. And so if you're being fired upon, you can exit siege mode and then just move straight backwards, keeping your gun pointed towards your enemy. And then that way you can bounce a lot of shells. And then what I'm doing here, this is very intentional. I'm knocking down an entire wall of trees, because the trees, while they're standing, their trunks offer almost no meaningful camouflage. But when you knock those trees down, all of a sudden you've got a very thick and broad bush line to work behind, and they're going to have to guess where exactly I am. Now, you don't want to knock over bushes, obviously, when enemies might be looking directly at it, because you just gave away your location. In much the same way, like when you step foot into the cap, you've basically put a huge "I'm here" sign telling people your approximate location, right? That first shot on the VK was too low. I should be aiming higher up on the side of the turret like I just did there. So that was my mistake. The VK should be dead, but I wasn't aiming high enough. But I've come to this particular place because it's got that trifecta, right? It's got a good field of view. It has bushes with an adjacent building, so I can play camo and vision games, and if I get spotted, I can just back up behind the building. And I have to punish these heavy tanks. If we allow them to get close enough where they can spot me, we're going to have trouble, right? Because I'm very vulnerable to arty, and the sides of the Strv 103B, I think there's only like 20 millimeters of armor, so it's auto pen for AP and APCR. You will never bounce shells, because regardless of the angle, because the caliber of the shells is just too large. It'll rip through the side armor. Okay, I got to back up here because their heavies are now getting close enough that I can't play these cute vision games forever, and moreover, I've got a good position to retreat back to. Right now, I do get spotted in the crossing there, but you know, this reverse speed is glorious. You know, I'm clocking over 40 kilometers an hour in reverse, so this is not easy for them to hit me. And you know, I've been rendered away from their vision long enough that it's going to be tough for their arty to figure out exactly where I am. And so now I can work the bush line that I created earlier of all these trees, you know, thanks to my earlier intentional gardening. And the great thing too is the standard B has moved back to a position where he can both watch their approach in case they try to come up the 9 or 0 lane. So if they're light tank, which this is something I would consider doing, if he tried moving up on the interior of the lake, he might get spotted by the standard B, right? So he's that right there, light tank is doing exactly what he should. He's coming up. The only thing he shouldn't do is come up too high because he doesn't know where I am. Now, I'm going to slide into the bushes, right? So from a vertical perspective, north-south perspective, I could fire here all day long. That Batchat 12T is never going to spot me, right? Because I've knocked down like 10 trees between us, right? Like, it's a huge camo wall. And thanks to the really high shell velocity and high DPM, fast reload, I put a shell into the Batchat 12T, so now he's now one-shottable. And what's amazing was, even though I'm firing, I didn't get lit by the E75. Why? Well, when I fire these bushes that I've created through my gardening, of course I lose the camo from them, right? But in front of the E75 were some bushes. So when I fire, those bushes still obscure his vision or provide me with some camo. Okay, so the main question is where the Ferdinand is. There's the risk that he might be circling clockwise around the lake, so I want to go to a position where I can spot him, because if I'm sitting behind a bush, I will outspot him all day long. And if we can, obviously, we want to take out the 12T because this is their vision. Once this guy's dead, I mean, the game, for all intents and purposes, is over, right? And our standard B is doing the right thing. He's pushing down the south side. You know, I don't have to worry about getting flanked by the Ferdinand. He's slow. The standard B spots the Ferdinand, and our arty, he did a good thing. Like, he was paying attention. He moved. He flexed south, which he should. Remember, a while back when their heavies were advancing, a lot of kind of like less smart or less capable arty players would have just sat back at like A9 or A0 the entire time, got spotted and gotten picked off. You know, it is one of the pet peeves for me is when arties aren't watching the map. It's so easy. You just move away from where the red dots are coming, and if there are no green dots in front of you, no friendly vehicles, you really should think about repositioning. Like, it's just common sense. In this particular case, the game's already pretty much over. The Batchat 12T is circling clockwise, which means I'm going to go counterclockwise around the lake to try to meet him, and I'm going to head up to the hill right around D3 because it has that magical trifecta of good field of view. And notice when I come up to the top of the ridgeline, I very consciously never expose myself without having a bush in front of me, right? And that allows me to get the first shot advantage on the 12T, to spot him, and I'm not even lit even after firing. So this tank is a lot of fun. You just got to be careful. You can brawl selectively as long as you're facing directly at your opponents, and if they aren't firing heat, if they're firing heat, you really got to back up and find something else to do, or just hope you can out DPM them. Right, but this is a really capable tank, and I think one of the things I like about it is the fact that you can play vision games with it, and it is so mobile. One other thing I should point out too, you may have noticed at the very beginning of the video, my account WN8 is over 2,900, so I have reached Super Unicum, on my original count by using only silver ammo in random battles. So it's to my knowledge, I think I'm the first person worldwide to do it, so it's a really cool achievement from that perspective. It was funny too, I was getting some comments from the players on the other side, people claiming that I was cheating, and what you just saw wasn't a replay of the battle, it was a real-time recording of the actual footage, and so, it's really clear that I wasn't cheating, because that's just not my thing. I want to give a shout out to the Nuclear Strategist, to Ethan for his recent gift of the AMX 1357, which is a fun tank, and also to Lenticular for the ELC Even 90, and I'll be posting a poll so you guys can vote on what you want to see next. Take care.